Travel for some people, the getting to the place can be a little stressful. Today's guest has done more of this type of travel than most out there, and today he's going to share some of his favorite lodges that go under the radar. And by the end of this episode, you are also going to get some of his biggest travel tips so you have a much better adventure this season. This is the Wet Fly Swing podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to fish species we all love. Hey, this is Dave, host of the Wet Fly Swing podcast. I've been fly fishing and traveling since I was a kid. Grew up around a fly shop and created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts out there. Chris Hunt, Hatch Adventure Travel Guru and Bloody Mary connoisseur, will take us into the world of fly fishing travel. You're going to find out how he got started on this brand after a lifelong experience with fly fishing, goes back to his grandfather. We get some advice on how you can make your trip better. We get some top tips on travel. And we also find out how he likes to pack his bags and what you might be expecting on the unexpected on these upcoming trips. Plus, if you didn't hear, we are heading to On Demark Lodge this year. You can get information right now. Go to wetflyswing.com/ondemark, ONDEMARK. Right now, sign up your name and email, and we'll follow up with you, let you know on availability for that trip. This is a big one, the Missouri. It's one of the best and biggest in the country. We talk about it on this podcast as well. So let's do it. Let's get excited, book those flights, get the travel plans ready. Here he is, Chris Hunt from Hatch.Travel. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for setting some time aside to talk travel. We love talking travel, of course. We've got listeners, and we're traveling all around this year. I'm excited to hear what you guys have going with Hatch, Adventure Travel. I want to hear more about some of the trips you're excited about, maybe some things you guys have going this year. Before we get into all that, take us back really quick to fly fishing. Is this something you've been doing a while, or are you newer to the fly fishing game?
Oh, yeah. I learned how to fly fish when I was a kid at the elbow of my grandfather. It was just one of those, those happy accident kind of things where he really liked to fish, and occasionally he'd take some of his grandkids with him, and it just stuck with me. It didn't stick with my cousins or my brothers as much, but I've been fly fishing off and on for, man, it's almost a shame to admit it, but almost 50 years.
Right. Yeah, you've been doing it a while. This is good. How long, until you got going where you saw, maybe more of the travel, the business? Have you been doing all that stuff for a while?
It took me a while, and I think the reason behind that is I live in eastern Idaho, and at the time when I learned how to fish, I was in Colorado. So the fishing was good, and, the places were interesting to me as a kid, and as I grew older, I still wanted to explore the West, and I spent most of my time, up through the 90s, just kind of exploring the Intermountain West from, Arizona and New Mexico all the way up through Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, and now in Idaho. I really didn't kind of get the travel bug until the early 2000s. And that's when, I went to Alaska the first time, and then it's been kind of a whirlwind since then. I've been traveling all over the world, and I probably fish more. I live in Idaho, and I probably fish more in other places than Idaho.
That's right. I think you do kind of a little bit like me. I'm the same way. We're out here, in Oregon and the West, and we're kind of traveling around the country. It's kind of cool. Is that what about the travel? What is it about the travel that you really love? Is there one thing that do you love the travel first off, the flying and the planes, trains, and automobile stuff?
I like to be there. I don't necessarily like what it takes to get there, if you know what I mean. There's something exciting about a trip to someplace, especially if it's someplace new. Even the obligatory Bloody Mary in the airport before you hop on the plane, and then you're on your way to someplace entirely new and interesting, and that's kind of exciting still. But truth be told, the 9-hour flight to Santiago, or the 15-hour flight to Sydney, I mean, these things they're no fun. But once you're there, once you're in, the place you're going to be, that's when it gets exciting. And I think like a lot of fly fishermen, I really like new water. I like places I haven't been before, whether it's, a hidden creek somewhere in the Uinta Mountains of Utah, or if it's, an entirely new rainforest river that I'm fishing for the first time in Chile. If it's new and it's interesting, I like that I like that initial visit where you have so much to learn and it feels like your face is kind of on a fire hose as all the information is coming at you. But I like to be there. The travel part is debatable. Sometimes it's interesting. And if you're with somebody, it's always easier. But I like going to new places and checking new places out. That's very appealing to me.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, and is the Bloody Mary? That's the that's the obligatory drink. Is that I've never kind of partaken. I guess I've never been a huge Bloody Mary fan, but that's a typical out there.
I just, when you travel, you want to relax and you want to unwind, and sometimes it helps to have a cocktail before you hop on the plane. It's just one of those things that you could. All right, I am officially off the clock, and I'm doing something new and different, and I'm going to celebrate. Let's start it off right. But yeah, just it's just part of the process, and I think, airplane travel is so hectic and manic, and you get through the security line, and you've taken your phone off and your laptop, and they're going through your carry-out bag because something looks suspicious or whatever. You get done with all that, and then it's boom, you're ready to go, and you're on this adventure, and that's what I like.
That's awesome. Well, maybe a little bit later we'll get some travel tips out of you to make people's lives a little bit better. But let's check. I want to, the Missouri River is a place that we're going to, and this year I'm excited to hear more about it. I know you guys have been there with On Demark Lodge. Let's start there, and then we'll bring it back into some of the other stuff you guys have going. Talk about that first. When did you guys hit? Do you remember that trip pretty well?
Yeah, we were there in June of 24.
Okay, June of 24. What's going on in the Missouri in June of the 24? What was that trip? Did you have a focus? Were you thinking dry flies, wet, nymphs, whatever? What was that?
That's a good question. The Missouri is one of the most resilient rivers, in my opinion, in the world. It's not a remote, isolated experience by any stretch of the imagination. The Missouri is very highly regarded by anglers, and as such, it's always crowded, no matter when you decide to go, especially during the summer season. But and the reason the Missouri is so productive is that it's just got such abundant bug life, and that bug life happens to be the result of a lot of aquatic, plant growth. So early in the year, if you're looking to, for nymphs and streamers and you want to meet the fish where they are, you almost have to go subsurface sometimes, at least sometimes. And the weed growth isn't so dramatic in June just yet. I mean, it's coming on and you can see it. The water's clear, obviously. So you can see the subsurface plants starting to grow, but they're not quite big enough to where they're catching every high stake nymph, or you're not bringing in a plate full of salad with every streamer retreat. So the June in the Missouri is a really good time to be there because you can do a little bit of everything. And, the dry fly fishing, the PMD hatches are absolutely epic in June, the clouds of hatches. So, like I said, it's just one of those rivers that you can put all these boats on it. You can crowd every single put in and take out with anglers and drift boats. And the chances are you're still going to catch fish, and the chances are really good that you're going to catch at least one or two really nice fish that will be memorable. And that's why I think the Missouri is such a special place. We throw everything at it, and it still produces nice fish.
That's right, and it's a big river, right? When you're on it, does it feel like there's plenty of room when you even during the busy times?
Yeah, I mean, it's like any other big river. You dissect it into smaller sections, and I always say I turn big rivers into 4 or 5 small streams. If you grew up fly fishing on small water, most of us started, fishing for brookies and beaver ponds, or small out of the way mountain streams where you're just you're kind of in the element. The way small water works is big rivers work exactly the same way. They just work on a much grander scale. So what I like to do is kind of bisect a big river into a handful of smaller stretches or smaller waters, if you will. And if you can get on one of those smaller little sections of the river, a side channel or an eddy, or even just cruising up along a bank that's got good structure, you fish that big river like you would a small stream, and you can spread out on the Missouri. I mean, if you're looking to have a photograph of you holding a giant brown on the river and there's nobody in the background, that might be a little difficult. Sometimes there are 4 or 6 boats in your viewscape, and it just is what it is. But those same anglers are, they're doing pretty much what you're doing. They found a seam on the river that they're fishing, and that's where they are. So you just have to, like I said, we throw so much at that river that you have to, out of defense, really, you have to find stretches where, one, you're the only boat or angler in that particular spot, and two, you've got to fish it a lot more intimately than you might another big river that has less traffic and less pressure.
Right. Like find your spots. You're on the river. If you get in a spot where there's a hatch and you got a little area, like stick with that area.
Yeah, I mean, fish it hard and fish it well, and give it some time. And if you have a good guide, and we did have a great guide in Craig Demark, and his son Warren is also an excellent guide. They'll put you where you need to be, and they'll give you every opportunity to succeed. Now, of course, the success is largely up to you, but if you're fishing the Missouri, my assumption is that you generally know what you're doing with a fly rod, and you're going to be successful on that river. It's so.
Yeah, there's a lot of fish.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of fish. Okay, and so for the trip for you guys, were you there for like a day, a couple days? How did that look?
We spent 4 days at the lodge, which is a pretty good. That gives you the chance to fish, right below the dam, then maybe come down around Craig for the second day, and then take do the canyon stretch and come out around Cascade on the last day. So we were there for 4 nights and 3 days of fishing, and we had pretty good fishing. My business partner, Earl Harper, and I were there, just about the peak of the PMD activity. And, in the afternoons, the clouds of bugs coming off the water was, never ceases to amaze me. I've been fly fishing most of my life, and watching a hatch like that, you're like, oh my God, it's going to be absolutely hopeless for them to find my fly in the middle of all of these bugs. And, and that's when Craig wisely mixes it up a little bit and tries to offer something a little bit different to the fish, and it generally works out.
Yeah, I know. I've heard that. I can't remember who was on the podcast recently, but they were talking about how, that's a time when the fishing's good and you're catching, on some fly or whatever. That's a good time to mix it up and see if you can get it on something else, right? Instead of just trying to catch, the same thing and catch the fish, right? Like actually go for it.
Yeah. Mother Nature's the world's best fly tire.
Yep. Right. Good. So yeah, this is good. So how is, and you guys do some other programs around, around the country, around the world. Maybe talk about that. How does your, at Hatch Adventure Travel, what describe that? Where are you guys going? Are you in places all over the country, all over the world? Where are you focused?
We've got about 40 destination partners around the world, and we send and host clients in places like Patagonia and New Zealand and Iceland, Greenland, Mongolia. But then we have sort of the usual suspects. We have the Missouri and Montana. We have Linehan's outfitting company in Northwest Montana on the Kootenai. We have a lodge that we represent here in Idaho on the South Fork of the Snake River, the South Fork Lodge, which is the South Fork. Between the South Fork and the Missouri, they might be the 2 best rivers in the country in terms of dependability. We are building our Canada program out quite a bit. We have 3 lodges now, and by the end of the summer, we'll have 5. We have a really robust saltwater program. We're just about to add a really good Cuba program out of Cayo Cruz, which was fascinating. I just got back from that trip about a week ago. And then, we've got Mexico, Belize, the Bahamas, and a really cool lodge that we are just kind of getting going on in Roatan, which is an island off the coast of Honduras. And that destination is pretty special for permit. We do the bonefish permit tarpon thing, but this particular place is a real permit hotspot that we think has a lot of potential. So we're putting a lot of time into that. And, I mentioned Patagonia, and when I say Patagonia, I mean Chile and Argentina, Tierra del Fuego. We send a lot of clients down there, and it's magical down there. Imagine what, fly fishing in Montana might have been like 75 years ago, and that's Patagonia is like.
Located in Boulder, Colorado, Intrepid Camp Gear is dedicated to designing and manufacturing the best and most highly engineered automotive camp gear on the market. Intrepid Camp Gear specializes in rooftop tents and aluminum cargo cases designed for skis, rods, hunting gear, and any other gear you may be hauling. Elevate your adventure with Intrepid Camp Gear right now. Head over to wetflyswing.com/intrepid right now. That's Intrepid, INTREPID, Intrepid Camp Gear. How does that process look, for you guys? I mean, you've been doing this a little while. How do you select, where you're going next, what the next lodge is going to be?
It's a really good question. And a lot of it is, just the desire on the part of a destination partner to have an agent help put heads in beds and butts in boats. We attended sort of did the show circuit thing for a couple of years there. And, there were things that worked out really well and things that didn't. And one of the things we discovered was we go to, say, a fly fishing show or an expo of some sort. Often it's not the trips you sell when you're at a place like that, but it's the other destinations and the people that work with them and for them that connect with you and give you, the opportunity to help represent their business. So, that's true with a place like, say, Belize River Lodge, which is just outside of Belize City on the Belize Old River. We met the folks there at a show in New Jersey, of all places, and we've been partnering with them now. This is our third year, and it's a great partnership. We send a lot of anglers down to Belize to fish for jungle tarpon and bonefish and permit, and it's a nice symbiotic relationship where the folks who run the lodge are delighted to have our help, and they pay us. They pay us a commission fee to help market and find clients that hopefully come back year after year. So it's one of those things where you find two interested parties who have the same general goal, and the goal, of course, is finding people who want to go fishing, and you put them together. And that's how we've been able to make this work for we're in our fourth year. So we started in December 2021, right in the middle of a global.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Maybe not the greatest time to start a travel company when travel was so challenging, but we kind of powered through, and we've grown steadily and healthily over the last 3 years. So we're, really just starting our fourth season, if you will, getting, sending people all over the world. We started with a dozen lodges, and now we're over 40. We're all over the world now. So it's cool. It's a lot of fun. We very responsibly try to vet every single destination we sell, which means we're not going to send clients to places that we haven't been ourselves.
Yeah. Is that what the vetting process looks like, that you actually go to the location, you understand it, you fish it, and then you can come back and say, hey, we've been there. This is what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally it. That's it in a nutshell. We take, lots of camera gear, video gear, and we gather all the assets, and then we go and, we do the fishing, and we experience everything from the food, the hospitality, we have the opportunity for other things besides fishing is sometimes important in certain places. We'll try to take in some of the local flavor, the local culture, if you will, and that's much more important in a place like, say, Argentina or Cuba or the Bahamas than it is on, say, the Missouri, where you're on the river. Period. That's what you got. So we go down, we do all of that, we gather all these digital assets, and then we come back and we build a website, travel page on our website, hatch.travel, and that information is used as we market these places with, we do a lot of email marketing, social media marketing. We do the usual Google ads and things like that. But we also just, we have become, I think, a fairly dependable outfit when it comes to clients coming back for more. So my favorite phone calls or emails are from clients who've been with us somewhere else before, and they want to go someplace new. It's all about service and how much you can show a client, both on the front end during the trip, and then as they get home, you're there to ask, hey, how'd it go? What can we do differently? What help us help you next time? So it's a process. We're also affiliated with Hatch Magazine, which makes it gives us a little avenue for some editorial content. And my career before I dove headlong into travel, I was a journalist, so I've always been a writer, and I've written a few books here and there, and I've been in I don't know probably thousands of magazine articles over the years, newspaper articles. So I have good experience travel writing, and I like to travel write. I like to write about places I go. So not only will we offer a destination, sort of gold star treatment on our website, where you'll be able to see like a sample itinerary, some photos of the place, the fish, the food, the people, etc. We'll also have a full travel feature that comes out, and that goes to, Hatch Magazine's readership, and Hatch's, and hatchmag.com. You can check out the magazine and see where
where you circulate. That's awesome. The Hatch Magazine, who's behind? I know we've obviously heard about that. Who is the founder of the Hatch Magazine?
Hatch Magazine was founded by Chad Schmuckler, and Chad is my business partner, one of my two business partners with Hatch Adventure Travel.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, yeah, this makes total sense. Yeah, so you have the great magazine, all the great content there, and then you have the travel program, and the Hatch makes sense because there's a lot of, obviously, the name, just in the branding, the overlap there. How do you guys do the video photography stuff? Is that something where you're bringing staff on, or are you guys doing that? How do you get all the great photos?
So the photos are done by either Chad or Earl. I do a few. I'm not a great photographer, but I'm serviceable. Like if Chris, I got a really nice brown on. Come get a photo. I can.
Right. Don't mess it up.
Yeah.
Don't mess it up. Right.
And I can do that competently. But
yeah.
Chad and Earl are much more accomplished on the photographic end. Earl, especially. Earl is a professional photographer based out of Seattle, and that's actually where our home offices are there, south of Seattle in Des Moines, Washington. So Earl takes, great photos. So does Chad. And we generally visit a place with, I'll show up with my fishing gear and, one camera that I have. Chad and Earl will show up with, 3 giant camera bags. They look like, they look like Sherpas going through the airport. So, but they, we bring drones and lots of camera gear and underwater gear and, some small video gear, things like that. And, we've done a few videos recently where we've contracted with some great videographers from all over the world. And, those videos are available on our YouTube site if you wanted to check those out.
Okay. Yeah. What's the YouTube channel?
Just as Hatch Adventure Travel. So when you get to YouTube, just search Hatch Adventure Travel and you'll see our logo, a little float plane coming up. And you'll see some of the videos that we've done recently. And they're really well done and they're really inspiring. And hopefully they encourage people to want to get outside and experience some of these places. But we are much more adept at the still imagery right now. We're getting better with video. We're still young. We're not a giant travel booking conglomerate like a lot of like there are. There are a few of them out there. We're much more smaller. I don't want to use the word boutique because I think that undersells us, but we're just a little more personal. When you call Hatch Adventure Travel, you're going to talk to me, Chad, or Earl. That's it. That's all of us. That's the entire staff.
Yeah, that's it. No, I hear you. No, this is great. I think that in the boutique, I guess, what does that mean exactly when you hear the boutique travel? What is that?
I think it's just a clever way to say, hey, we're really small, but we're trying hard.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's accurate, but, we've grown so much in the last 3 years that, I think we're approaching the player status, like we're people in the industry have now heard of us and we're starting to build some word of mouth growth, and people understand when they come to us they're going to get stellar service top to bottom, and we're going to know exactly where they're sending them. We're going to be able to tell them exactly what to expect. Everything from the fishing is great, make sure the guide takes you here, talk to the chef, make sure he makes this dish, enjoy the pisco sour on the deck and the wood-fired hot tub overlooking the Andean lake. Do whatever, you just kind of, you want to give people an idea of what they're in for. And we can do that. And, the same is true with a place like the Missouri. Like you really do want to sit down and have dinner with Craig and Becky at Demark Lodge. They are amazing people. We love them to death. They're good friends now. And, we've been there once. We communicate often. We sold a few trips, and, we hosted a trip last fall. We've got a few anglers going this summer. It's, the nice thing about On Demark Lodge is that the Missouri River can best be described as, controlled chaos. You get to Craig, you're at the boat, you're at the put, waiting in line. Once you're on the river, your guide is constantly watching to make sure that you're not, stepping into someone else's line, or that you're not, his client is getting a solid opportunity to fish. And you're fishing and you're focused, and it can be a little stressful if you let. But when you get off the river and you go to a place like On Demark that is away from Craig and away from Cascade, kind of right in the middle, it's totally chill and it's relaxing. You can put your feet up and have a beer and talk about your fishing for the day. And, it's a nice, comfortable place, and it's not too big. They only have room for 6 anglers at a time. The food Becky is very gifted in the kitchen. And, when you are there, they're all about you. And that really makes a difference to people. So, this is the kind of information that we share with our clients. Like, we want them to know that when you are at the lodge at On Demark, or if you're at Magic Waters in Patagonia or Battle Hill Lodge in Iceland, you're going to know exactly what you should expect. Everything from, the comfort of the beds to the quality of the appetizers to, the guides you really want to try to fish with.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's well said. I think that's what's cool about the Missouri trip with Craig and On Demark is that, yeah, you're out there, with a guide, first of all. So you're out there, they've got it all dialed. They're going to get you to the water. And then after you're off, even if you got a little pressure anywhere, you're going to hop off and be able to just slip into the cabin on the river, have the food, have everything taken care of. And then, have another day the next day. Right. And then maybe if you learn, I always say, a lot of people do this, a lot of our listeners too, where they maybe take a guide trip for a day or two and then have a few days where they're actually on their own DIYing it, using what they learned. So I think that would be a big thing, right? As opposed to just like, hey, I've got a boat, I'm just going to jump on the Missouri and try to battle it out with everybody else, right? I could see that being a challenge if you're on your own.
Yeah, that would not be my preferred way to fish the Missouri. And I know a lot of guys do it. A lot of guys have drift boats. A lot of people have drift boats, and it's at least a 2-man operation. It's very hard to fish and float by yourself, which is some guys can do it. Some people can pull it off. I don't think I have the constitution to pull that together. But that's the nice thing about fishing a place like the Missouri with somebody who knows the Missouri, and that is, you can really cut the learning curve. And if one nice thing about the Missouri is, over the course of a summer, it becomes wadeable. There are places you pull in and you can walk in and fish on your own and really dive in and delve into a corner of the river that, and once you're there, the boats will leave you be. You've staked out your stretch of water and it's all yours.
That's cool.
So
that's a great point.
Yeah. So you spend 2 or 3 days on the river with Craig or Warren, and then, you say you want to try it on your own one day. You would just, Craig, over the course of his day's fishing, would say, this is a good spot to get in and wade. This is a good side channel for you to try on your own. And you are arriving at the river armed with a lot of good information. And
yeah, I love that.
Chances of success are better.
No, that's a great point. I think in any river rowing in the country, you could probably take that same advice. Yeah, you're out with the guide, hit them up a little bit for some areas, and then go out the next day if you want to or whatever. But this is good. So cool. Well, we are in the process of putting together a trip, and like I said, it's going to be awesome. I want to talk a little more about this and some of your travel, but let's get into a few of these travel tips we talked about. I don't want to miss this, because you do a lot of traveling, right? It sounds like you're all over the world. What if you had to say maybe a few, maybe 5, 4 or 5, 6, maybe some tips? What are you telling somebody? Let's say they're getting ready to cross on a long flight and do all this stuff. Do you have any things you're always thinking about as far as tips?
Yeah, air travel is always an adventure, and it's always my advice to clients when I'm on the phone with them and we're planning out a trip on, let's say you want to go to the Yukon. We have a great lodge up in Whitehorse, outside of Whitehorse, called Dalton Trail Lodge, where, the fishing is stellar, the people are wonderful, but it's a process. You have to fly from wherever you are to Vancouver. 9 times out of 10, you got to stay the night in Vancouver. And then you got to go back to the airport and recheck your bags on a small commuter flight and make sure you get to Whitehorse, where the lodge picks you up and drives you an hour and a half to the lodge. So there are lots of moving parts, and a lot of people can't fly direct to Vancouver. Let's say you're in I don't know, let's say you're starting your trip in Miami and you're flying. If you can't get a direct flight to Vancouver, chances are you're going to fly to Seattle. So you get to Seattle, and then you're going to get on a flight from Seattle, a short hop over to Vancouver. But you want to make sure, because in your checked bags, you've got 3 fly rods, waders, wading boots, everything you need, all your flies, all your stuff. Maybe just as a precautionary measure, you've checked 1 fly rod and reel, or you've carried on 1 fly rod and reel so that you have, in case something goes wrong. The trick for me is I always tell clients, plan at least to have a 90-minute layover in every airport you're in. And I know that sounds, exhausting, but for me, that's the bare minimum. That's anything less than that. I am constantly looking at my airline app to make sure my bag is off the plane and on the next plane.
Right, right, and that's another good tip we've talked about the airline. So actually have your Apple ID, whatever they call it, the AirTag, right? Have your bags AirTag. That way you can see them. You can actually see your bags.
Yep, it's always a good idea if you have an AirTag, and there are other options too. The folks who are using Android can find a similar. But again, like I said, everybody complains about long layovers. I'm thrilled if I have a layover that's 2 hours or longer. Gives me a chance to get off the plane, go to the bathroom,
Yeah, get some food. Have a Bloody Mary, right?
It depends on the time of day, really.
Yeah. Well, the airport, it seems like the airports, the time of day is out the window. It seems like you could have a Bloody Mary, no matter what, right?
Right. You're exactly right. Or you could, have a drink, have a burger, and a basket of fries or whatever. Go to the bathroom one more time, check your email, make sure your connections are good and you're not rushed. And then you can just kind of leisurely stroll to your gate and get in with your boarding group. So for me, that's the first big tip, is give yourself time in between flights. And if you have a flight, where often when you search for a flight, there'll be a little red caution sign that comes up and says your layover is less than an hour. Don't book that flight. Spend a little more, book another flight. Some other tips when it comes to air travel: if you have it and you can afford it, upgrade. And you don't need to upgrade to first class, but upgrade so that you're getting a priority tag on your bag. That matters. In a place like, let's say you're heading from, you want to fly from where I am in Idaho Falls to Balmacheda in Patagonia in Chile. You're going to fly from Idaho Falls probably to Denver or Dallas. And then you're going to fly from Dallas or Houston, if you're on United. You're going to fly to Santiago overnight. Then you're going to get there. You got to go through customs, get your bag, wander over to the domestic terminal. Again, like a 2-hour layover is a 2-hour connection time is tight in a place like that. And then you're going to put your bag on the next smaller flight, like a LATAM flight from Santiago to Balmacheda. And if you, on that last flight, which you're going to book separately to save money, on that last flight, if you can upgrade to their version of Economy Plus or Economy Premier or whatever it is, and it's $75, do it. You'll get a priority tag on your bag, and you'll get to board early with the right group. So you don't have to wait in the chaos, not so much in the Santiago airport, but on your way home when you're in Balmacheda and you're there with 300 people in an airport that's designed to hold half that priority line, and you're on the plane relaxing first class, you've got that Bloody Mary already. So there you go.
Yeah.
So I always recommend, if you have the means and you're able to do it, to upgrade. Like I said, first class is lovely, and if you can make it work, that's great. If you travel enough and have miles, chances are you already have that upgrade. But if you're new to it and maybe you don't have the miles accumulated yet that you might have elsewhere, spend the $75 or $100 to up your status one level, and that puts a priority tag on your bag, which means your bag is going to make the trip with you.
Right. This is great. And then a lot of these things you see just on the tickets, you'll have, the lowest ticket, which essentially is, you probably should never get that, because basically if you have to change your flight, you can't even do that, right? But then you've got the next level. You're saying kind of that next level, next step is what you want to at least go to.
Yeah, there are a few reasons for that. One is, like I said, your bag might get a priority tag, which is nice. But also you'll be able to board with a boarding group that has enough overhead space by the time you get on the plane to where you can stow your carry-on up there and not have to, walk 7 more rows, and then when the plane ends, you got to walk back 7. So, air travel is stressful for a lot of people, and even for me. And I travel, a dozen times a year. There are still, moments where, and I think it's because you kind of, if you're perceptive at all, you pick up the stress that other people are putting out there. People who aren't seasoned travelers, and they're worried about making their flight, so they're crowding the gate and they're shoulder to shoulder, and maybe you're in boarding group 5 and they're in boarding group 6, and they're just they're in your space and they're trying to figure out how they can get on the flight. And so the more you can do to make it easier on yourself, the less stress, and the more you're going to enjoy the anticipatory part of the trip, which is you spend your time
to get out.
Yeah.
On Demark Lodge offers a world-class experience with one of the finest rainbow trout and brown trout fisheries in the world. Their family-owned and operated Missouri River Lodge offers comfortable accommodations, delicious home-cooked meals, and personalized service that make you feel like family. Days on the water are capped off by appetizers, beverages, dinner, and stories on the back deck and around the campfire. Book your stay for an unforgettable fly fishing adventure where memories are made and the fish stories are real. You can head over right now to wetflyswing.com/ondemark. That's ONDEMARK on Demark right now to book your magical Missouri River trip. What about, do you have maybe a couple more tips you'd throw in here? That could be anything about, even baggage. I know that I've heard stuff about 6 pieces versus 4-piece rods and stuff like that. Any other tips?
4-piece rod for most of the travel duffels that we can all get our hands on. A 4-piece rod is just fine. I don't like to carry my fly rod on the flight. I don't like to have it, I don't like to be the guy wandering around the airport with a fly rod tied to my backpack, and that same guy has 2 $500 reels stuffed into the bottom of his backpack. For me, I much prefer trusting the airlines and knowing that I've done everything that I can possibly do to make sure my bag makes it where I'm going. A lot of guys and a lot of anglers, they carry a fly rod with them. I don't do it.
Yeah. Well, my thought on that is, and I think it probably is a good idea if you want to carry it, then you have your stuff, especially if it's stuff like, I don't know, whatever, flies, stuff like that. But, I mean, you're going to be going, if you're going to a lodge, especially, right, there will be backup stuff, you could use if something crazy happens.
Yeah. I mean, there are some lodges that just don't do that. Some lodges have a rental program or a loaner program and all that stuff. But like, if you're going to go to Patagonia, they have everything you need. If you're going to go to the Missouri, Craig has a wall of Orvis fly rods just sitting there. And there's no need. You could even make the argument that a good 75% of the trips you take, you don't need to bring anything. Maybe your wading boots. That would be about it. Now, I have, I'm 6'5", and it's hard. I'm a hard size to fill. So I always travel with my waders and wading boots. Sometimes I will leave the rods at home and fish with the gear that is at the lodge. It's almost always good gear. It's been well maintained, and you know that you're going to have the right line with the right rod, and of course you're going to have the right flies. It's just, the more information you have before you hop on a flight, the easier it's going to be for you in the travel process. And if that means you don't need to bring 3 fly rods to the Yukon, don't bring 3 fly rods to the Yukon.
Yeah, right. What is your typical when you're packing for a week-long trip? What does the packing look like? Is this something that you've got a step by step? You know exactly what clothing you're only taking a certain amount. How do you do all that?
Yeah, man, it's never the same, and it's always different. I'm not a very organized person. I'll be honest with you. If this was a video podcast, Dave, you'd see
right.
Organize my outfit.
So you could send us a direct packing list of exactly every item you're taking.
I put my travel duffel on the floor in front of me, and I just kind of go through my.
Go through your stuff. What's your travel duffel? What travel duffel? Do you have one you really love?
Right now I have an Orvis. It's a nice deep travel duffel with a hard bottom.
Oh, the hard bottom, right.
So I feel good about putting my fly rods in there.
And this is one that you could throw up above you when you get in the plane?
No. This check bag. Yeah.
There's a check bag. What do you use for your actual, what are you taking on the plane with you above your head?
I use a waterproof fishing backpack as my carry-on. And when I get to the lodge, I open the drawer next to the bed and I dump all the stuff in that drawer, my chargers and my earbuds and, everything. And I get into my bag that I've pulled off the airplane and I replace it with fly reels and, leaders and tippets and everything else. And I take that with me out on the river or the lake or wherever I'm going.
Oh, I see. So you dump, right. So you take all your stuff, dump it in the hotel, and then use that bag for your daily.
Yeah. It's just a little bit easier, and the backpack is a comfortable way to get around the airport. If I have to carry, if I have more stuff, like say my check bag is full of fishing gear, top to bottom, because I'm going somewhere where they don't loan gear, like Roatan, for example, is not a lodge that loans gear. So you have to go with, an 8 weight for bonefish, a 9 weight for permit, a 10 weight for tarpon. You need wading boots. You got to have, sun hoodies and shirts and sunscreen and bug spray and hats and sunglasses and buffs and sun gloves and all that. I mean, it's too much. So all of that stuff goes in the check bag, and then in the separate carry-on, and I'll just use like a little wheeled carry-on, nothing special. I suppose I could find the same thing at Sims or Orvis or Fish Pond or whatever, but I just have a little hard-sided carry-on that I wheel around the airport.
Yep. The waterproof bag, I think that is another good tip, depending on where you're going, having that bag because sometimes your bags in the smaller areas might get thrown on the tarmac and it might be downpouring, right? So probably a waterproof bag. Do you do that for your check bag?
My check bag is not waterproof. It's water resistant.
Water resistant.
If it's sitting outside in a downpour, I'm going to have wet stuff.
Yeah, you are. Has that ever been much of an issue?
It happens once in a while, but not very often. The only time that I've really had a problem is we had to put it on the back of a horse on the ride into River of Dreams base camp in Chile. And on about halfway through the horseback ride, which is about 3.5 hours, the skies opened up and everybody's stuff was wet. So when we got to the camp, everybody's spreading their stuff out.
All right. So out of that group, nobody had a waterproof bag, a Patagonia bag or anything?
Everybody uses that stuff for stuff that's, that needs to stay dry. Cameras.
Oh, right.
Stuff like that. And there were a couple guys who had the big, heavy, vinyl-coated Patagonia duffels. But that's the problem when you're traveling through airports, is that they are big and heavy. So you get to baggage claim, and the first thing you're looking for isn't your bag, but you're looking for a luggage cart.
Yeah. Oh, right. That is a hassle.
Yeah. So then you got a whole new...
Right.
a whole new situation.
Yeah, I gotcha. So that's kind of the bags. What about any other tips you'd throw out there? Anything come to mind just on overall in the travel you're going? You said that maybe going to Santiago, from Idaho. Anything else, at least on even getting into the towns? Anything there?
Just be smart and don't push it on the time. Arrive with plenty of time to check your bags and get to your gate and get through security. One thing that I've done for a long time is I've gone through the TSA pre-process, which allows me to move through security.
Oh, right. Yeah, TSA. So is that something you do as an online course or something like that?
No, you show up, they have offices at airports. So the next time you're in the Denver airport or the Salt Lake airport or wherever, find the TSA office, make an appointment. Go in, you show them your passport, you fill out the paperwork, they run a check, and then in a week or two you'll get a known traveler number that you can enter when you buy an airplane ticket, and your ticket will come out and you're pre-checked, which means you don't have to take your shoes off, you don't have to take your laptop off, and you get to walk right past all the snaking lines of general boarding security lines. And you're through in a heartbeat. It's so much faster. I love it. So highly recommend it. It's $75. Make the time the next time you're at a big airport. Get your TSA pre-check. A lot of folks do the global entry, which is basically the same thing, only for international flights. I don't have global entry yet. I maybe go overseas 4 times a year, and I've never really had an issue with customs or security there. It's the airports like Denver or Atlanta or Dallas or Houston. I mean, they're nightmares. And if you can have the TSA pre, you're going to cut the stress level. And honestly, that's what travel is supposed to be fun, right? You're supposed to enjoy it. And
You're supposed to enjoy it, right?
anything you can do to remove the unknowns and the unexpecteds, I absolutely recommend doing that.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I always say I'm a little unique because I love all the travel and you know what I mean? I kind of just love the whole process of the flights I always go back to joke. I think of the planes, trains, and automobiles. If you're old enough to remember that movie, it was just a classic, you know what I mean? Like just the worst. But I kind of love it. It's an adventure. Like you said, it's in your, in your brand, right? The adventure travel. Like it's like everything is kind of cool. And then you get out there and then, I mean, how good does that feel when you get there and you're like, oh my God, now I'm actually getting ready to go fishing.
Yeah, it's
Right.
pretty
That's like,
cool. You get off the plane, collect your bags, and you walk outside a baggage claim, and there's somebody holding your name on a placard, and they're like, all right, party starts now.
right. That's it. That's it. Good. Well, let's start to take it out here with our conservation corner segment we do here, and we love to check in. I know you have some conservation stuff that you're focused on, but first off, we mentioned this. This is presented by On Demark Lodge today. They're obviously doing some great stuff. We are doing a cool event actually with you guys and with some of the other partners here. And the cool thing is we have an interview with the Big Hole River Foundation. And we're talking about some of the issues up in that area. It's really interesting because they're doing some cool stuff with water quality, trying to figure out what's going on and things like that. But so a big shout out to the Big Hole River Foundation, to On Demark Lodge. This is going to be awesome. We're always trying to do good stuff here. For you, what is that conservation? You're traveling all around the world. Are you focused on conservation? Are you thinking about that on your trips?
Well, I worked for 16 years, almost 17 years for a large national conservation organization. And so it's kind of in my DNA. And we work to protect trout and salmon in their habitat and the opportunity for anglers to continue to fish for trout and salmon. And it just, in today's day and age with, a warming world and warmer water and hoot owl closures and restrictions and things like that, it's hard to be a dedicated fly fisher in the West and not understand what's happening to our trout water. So without, diving into, mission statements and all of that stuff, what we've decided to do at Hatch Adventure Travel, because the air travel has an impact on greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions when you travel, we have taken on ourselves to credit every single client that we have. We pay for their carbon emissions through the climate gold standard program. And what that means is that when you buy a plane ticket, you'll look and you'll see, and on your ticket or during the booking process, you'll see exactly how many tons of carbon that you are personally responsible for emitting into the environment. So what we do when we help clients with airline tickets, we bird dog the right fares and we help them find the right tickets. And once they buy that ticket, we'll look at that carbon emission number, and we will add up that number, and then for a round trip ticket, let's say your carbon emissions to Chile are 1.4 tons of carbon. We double it because you're going to come home, so 2.8. And then we take that 2.8 and we multiply it by 1.5. So we essentially pay 150% of your carbon footprint when you travel with Hatch Adventure Travel. That, for us, is a way that we can kind of offset the impact that we and our clients have on the global climate crisis. So, and what we do and how that works is we'll pay through the Gold Standard program, and then that money goes to help people deal, with help them with wood stoves in Mexico or water treatment in Chile or Argentina or Brazil or wherever we're sending people. So it makes a difference on the ground in places where, these people, they're having a very small footprint, a very small carbon footprint, but they're dealing with the results of, the impacts of climate change around the world. Like for instance, in the Caribbean, climate change is a direct contributor to these giant blooms of sargassum that are ending up on the beaches in places like, Ascension Bay or
Belize. Yeah, I've seen that. They've got a new fly. They've got a new floating, right? The crab flies.
Yeah, the floating crab fly. Yeah, that's a cool deal. I've done that. I haven't caught one on the floating fly, but
partly that's because of these blooms that are going on,
yeah,
right?
exactly. It's an excess of sargassum, a seaweed. which is normal in the environment, but it's not normal at the rate that we're seeing it.
The levels, yeah.
Yeah. And, it washes up on the shores of these places like, Ixcalac in southern Mexico. And it just, it sits there in the sun and it rots and it gives off horrible, horrible odors, like terrible.
Oh, right.
You've ever,
Like, what is it? Like the odor, like the, what's the odor?
it's the sulfurous.
Yeah, the sulfur odor. Yeah, the bad stuff, right?
It smells exactly like that. It's horrible. It's awful.
Oh, man.
And it just sits there and rots. So, some of those carbon offset funds go to efforts to harvest that sargassum before it hits the beach. And people are finding ways to use it as biofuel, to mix it with lime and water and make concrete. They're finding ways to use this stuff, which is good. But, the cause is clear. There's so much nutrient pollution coming into the Atlantic basin from the Amazon, the Mississippi, and the Congo, all over that basin, that is, there's so many nutrients in the water that the algae is blooming like crazy. And sargassum, believe it or not, is an algae, not a plant. So that has become a real issue for us. So we've made the conscious effort to do our very best to offset the carbon footprint that our clients incur when they go on a long trip.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. You're doing that. You mentioned the conservation group for 16 years. What was the name of that
Well,
group?
I worked for TU, for Trout Unlimited.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay. Yeah, Trout Unlimited, right. Yeah, the biggest conservation. Are they kind of, I mean, they're the biggest group, I think, in the U.S. Are they also internationally? Well, I guess on salmon and trout, they are probably the biggest in the world.
Well, I think so. Internationally, we have a Trout Unlimited Canada, but they're not directly affiliated.
No. Are they doing stuff internationally in other countries other than Canada?
It's been 4
Yeah, it's been a while.
now, Dave. I really don't know.
They probably are. I'll bet you I think they're mostly focused on North America, but I'll bet you they're at least thinking about it.
TU has always been a good organization to donate to if you wanted to help with your local watershed. Local TU chapters are where the rubber meets the road. The national office is much more geared toward policy stuff, and it's going to be a tough sled for some of these big conservation groups with the way federal funding is going to change in the next 4 years under this.
Yeah, that's right.
So your best bet, if you really want to help, is to donate unrestricted funds.
Yeah, donate and volunteer, right? I think that's a big part of it. Get out there and actually.
Part of it is obviously, yes, volunteering. Like I'm a member of my local chapter here in Idaho Falls, and we do what we can do to help them, and I know my business partners are the same way. So my advice, if you are a trout and salmon guy or gal, and you want to help with conservation, look local first.
Look local first. Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Well, let's start. We got a little random segment, some questions. We used to call this our rapid fire round. I don't always call it the rapid fire round anymore, but let's jump into a few of these and then we'll hop out of here. So, this is really, we're going to keep it on travel, right? So you guys do a lot of stuff. What do you think, if you had to say, what is the most underrated fly fishing trip you guys do? One of those places that you just love that maybe doesn't get the press.
This is a good one. Here's why. We sell a lodge in Northwest British Columbia that does daily flyouts from Muncho Lake right on the Alaska Highway. And they take you to places all throughout the Northern Rockies and the coastal range there for everything from big, fat rainbow trout to Arctic grayling, bull trout, lake trout, northern pike. And if you're a spin angler and you want to catch a bunch of walleye, they can do that. The reason it's underrated is it's not your typical fly out, like Alaska fly out Bristol Bay Lodge, where you're at a fancy schmancy, lodge tipping your pinky with delicious scotch at the end of every day. But at Northern Rockies, you're at their lodge, which is lovely and nice, but it's reachable via the Alaska Highway. But every day you're on a new place on a new water in a new place. And the rate for that trip is ridiculously low compared to, say, a Bristol Bay adventure. And we have Bristol Bay partners that we love and try to send clients to, but the price range for some of those lodges is.
Yeah. What is the difference in price range from, and is this Northern Rockies Adventures?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, no, this is great. We just had a podcast, Actually, we had Phil Roy was up there, so we just have something that is out there. So we know, yeah, Daniel and the crew. So what is the difference between a Northern Rockies Adventures trip versus, say, the Bristol Bay?
Northern Rockies Adventures is right now, as if you wanted to go this summer, and we have a few spots left, a 6-day fly out trip would be $7,500, which is almost exactly half of what you would pay for a similar trip in Bristol Bay.
Oh, wow, it's that much. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love fishing in Bristol Bay. The rainbows are amazing, and the dollies, and the chance later in the year to hook into big silvers, and the bears, and all the accoutrements surrounding an amazing Alaska adventure. But man, you pay for it. You pay for it. At Northern Rockies, you get something very similar for half the price, and a great family-owned. If you've talked to Daniel, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Great family-owned operation with wonderful people, excellent service, really good food, comfortable cabins right out on the lake. I mean, the last night we were there toward the middle of August, like one of the first nights where it was really dark all night long. And we stepped out on the deck and with a tumbler of Canadian whiskey, and Earl and I were sitting there just chatting, and I look up, and man, the sky was just dancing with the northern lights. So,
oh, you had the Northern Lights,
yeah.
a little like, well, is that when they start coming later in the summer?
Yeah, August, when it gets dark all night, in August.
Oh, wow.
When that first happens. And man, I tell you what, it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I've been all over the world, and I've seen the Northern Lights in Iceland and Alaska and here in Idaho, believe it or not.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah, but that night on Muncho Lake, watching the lights dance across the sky for a good 2 hours was absolutely life-changing. And, that trip that's a good, affordable, a good, and of course, affordable is relative. I get
right, relative. Yeah, it's not as much as some of these other higher end.
I would recommend that experience to anyone, and here's why I would recommend you do it soon: is because the rates are going to go up. Fuel is higher.
Right.
We're tariffing the hell out of.
Yeah, we're tariffing. Right. Yeah, you get all that stuff. Yeah, we don't know. Right.
Some of this silly stuff that you don't think about as an angler. You try to. You can go on a fishing trip and not talk politics. Good for you. But this is one of those deals where rates are going to go up and it's going to cost more. And Daniel's operation is top notch. Great pilots, amazing planes, the scenery. There's one thing about flying over a boreal landscape in Manitoba or Saskatchewan. It's just all lakes and trees. But here, you're kicking field goals
the Rockies,
in the mountains. Yeah, it's
right.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Yeah, no, we'll put a link out to that episode we had with Lance. We had it, Lance and Phil there. We'll put that in the show notes because that was an awesome one we just did. This is good. So I'm glad we got a shout out to there. A couple other ones. Let's just kind of keep this going here as we wrap it up. What do you think are, maybe just fly fishing travel trends? I mean, you guys are doing stuff out there a lot around the world. Are you seeing some trends with travel and maybe your clients, customers, and things like that, or just the adventure travel industry?
Like anybody who runs a small business, my eyes are kind of wide open, and we're cautiously watching these, the tariff situation, the change in administration, hoping that the impacts of some of these choices are not going to have a trickle down to travel consumers. There's a great willingness to travel right now, and travel is healthy.
Yeah, it is healthy. How does that, on the tariff, just for the, you probably know more than me for sure, like how would a tariff potentially work and how could it potentially really affect the travel?
When you're imposing 25% tariff on goods coming into the country from two of our, most, dependable and staunchest allies, Canada and Mexico, with the idea that this is going to incentivize them to stop, drug trafficking, human trafficking, illegal immigration, etc. All that is here nor there. The bottom line is that somebody's going to end up paying that 25%. It's going to be passed on to consumers. So regardless of what business you're in right now, if people are paying more for gas at the pump, groceries at the store,
everything. Just like you said, within our adventures, gas prices go up, or fuel, right? Airline fuel, they gotta increase it.
So there's a legitimate worry that this is going to have an impact on the overall, the amount of disposable income that people are going to have for a luxury like travel. And let's be honest, for most people, fly fishing travel is a luxury, something that they don't have to do, but they want to do. They want to get the fulfillment that it brings to them. But as of right now, travel is healthy, and we're optimistic. What we're seeing now is the willingness for people to travel longer distances to see more exotic places. Like, we're sending a lot of people right now to Chile and Argentina. And the reason for it is simple. It's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. And the price tag for a trip to, say Magic Waters Lodge in Chile and Patagonia, it's only $7,500 a week. It's the same price tag for, to go to Northern Rockies Adventures in a much closer destination in British Columbia. And again, it's half of what it would cost you to go to Alaska. But of course, the difference is, oh my gosh, that's a hell of a plane ride wherever to Santiago, to Balmaceda, So, but we're seeing that there's a willingness for people to do it because right now prices aren't out of control. Prices are still very good. Even airline rates right now are, they kind of fluctuate, but if you plan ahead of time and book at the right time, you're getting good rates. So the trends for us have been over the last year, like we're really sending clients to Patagonia, and we're sending clients to New Zealand as well. We still send a good amount of clients every fall, every September, to Iceland to fish for giant sea trout. We've got a handful of clients going to Greenland later this summer, which is an interesting and somewhat exotic and difficult to reach place.
Sure. And what is Greenland? What are the species? Are the same on Greenland as Iceland?
No, the Greenland fishery is all Arctic char.
Oh, it's all so just Arctic char.
The lodge that we work with is solely.
That's cool. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty special. Yeah, Arctic char. That's one of those ones that.
Yeah, it's a killer fish, man. Then they come out of the water bright orange and absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. This is cool. Well, so this is those are definitely some good trends. Let me give you one random one as we get out of here. I always love to talk. Movies, kind of audio, stuff like that. So you're on a long flight. You mentioned a 9-hour flight. Are you listening? What are you doing to spend your time? Are you just sleeping? Or are you watching movies? And if it was a movie, what movie is your go-to?
Oh, man, I don't, for some reason, I'm just not able to sleep well on planes. I'll catch a few winks here and there, but I'm a big offline Netflix, download Amazon Prime, Netflix, whatever.
Yeah. So what's your movie? So do you watch kind of everything? Do you have a genre movie? Do you have a favorite movie you love watching? You could watch like 100 times.
So I love a good spy thriller. I know it sounds crazy, everything from James Bond to, the Bourne movies. So if I can find a good series, a good spy series, I'm all about that. And the reason for that, the reason I watch them on the flight is my girlfriend is not at all interested in those movies. So at home, when we're watching TV together, that's not what we're watching.
You don't get them, right? This is your time. This is your time to get the stuff you like.
Yeah, I don't know why I just find it exciting and interesting to watch those kinds of movies. They're my favorite.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, spy movie. And then what about on a fishing? Are there any fishing really? We always go back to The River Runs Through It, right? It's the greatest fly fishing movie. Are there any other fly fishing or fishing movies you've ever heard of that are out there that you like?
I love the movie Jaws, and I know that's
Jaws.
A fishing movie, but I mean, really, it's the greatest fishing trip ever, right? Where
that's true.
You make it home, paddling on a board held up by two shark tanks.
God, that's a great. Yeah,
it's a great movie. It was a great story, but I love that movie, and I always, Robert Shaw as Captain Quint, and Roy Scheider and
it was good.
Dreyfuss. I mean, that was.
Oh, was Dreyfuss in that? Richard Dreyfuss was in that too.
He was the marine biologist who.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, Dreyfuss was great. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll definitely get a link to a clip from Jaws in the show notes for this one.
Yeah, my favorite line is the shark swims by and Roy Scheider looks up at Robert Shaw and he goes, "You're going to need a bigger boat."
That's right. Oh, man, what a classic one. Good. Okay, this is awesome. I think, Chris, we can leave it there. This has been really great. Appreciate all your time today. We'll send everybody out, like we said, hatch.travel if they want to connect with what you guys have going, all your trips. And, really excited to keep in touch with you here and looking forward to, seeing that next thing you guys got going.
Hey, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate the time.
All right, today's call to action for you is if you're interested in the Missouri trip, go to wetflyswing.com/ondemark. That's ONDEMARK, on Demark Lodge, and enter your email and we'll follow up with you on availability. Also, if you want to connect on some of the other trips that Chris mentioned, you can go to right now, go to hatch.travel, check in with Chris and let him know. And also, that's the best way to follow up there. I want to give you a heads up. We have a YouTube channel going on strong right now. We have webinars. We just got done with one with Bruce Richards. It was a fly casting. This is an epic webinar that we put together. We're doing another one with Landon Mayer, and we are just kicking these out. So go subscribe to Wet Fly Swing on YouTube. One last shout out. Littoral Zone is coming back. That's our next episode. So subscribe to this podcast right now. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you are, if you click subscribe, subscribe or follow, you will get that next episode delivered right into your app. And that one is Phil Roy, and he's always good with the Littoral Zone. If you're interested in stillwater fishing, he is the man. All right, we got to get out of here. Hope you have a great morning. Hope you have an amazing afternoon. And if you are in the evening, maybe you're traveling late into the night, maybe you're on a plane right now, you downloaded this episode, you're flying potentially back home to your home waters. If that's you and you're listening right now to this one, I appreciate you for checking in, and make sure to send us an email, Dave at Wet Fly Swing. Let me know you've been following the show, and we'll talk to you then. Have a great one.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.